See you there.
Oh, that's
Okay.
okay. It's showtime. It's at the
Okay.
top of the hour. Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. School desegregation was a major issue during the civil rights movement. It was a major accomplishment. But did anybody take time to speak with those students, those children who were on the front line of school desegregation in communities across the United States? To speak to them about the trauma, to to them about having to try to learn in hostile learning environments. Well, my guest tonight is a professor from Jackson State in Jackson, Mississippi, Dr. Timothy Turner. He is spearheading a project called Prisoners of War, children in the United States of America who were prisoners of America's desegregation program. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about that trauma and what's being done today to address the trauma from school desegregation in the United States of America. That's our show tonight on the Timbuktu Report. Stay with us. Our guest tonight on the Timbuktu Report, in the absence of Dr. Rick Stevenson, is Dr. Timothy Turner from Jackson State Community College in Jackson, Mississippi. Dr. Turner, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure, Pam. I appreciate you having me on.
Dr. Turner is from Newberry, South Carolina. He was one of many children across the United States on the front line of school desegregation, experiencing the emotional trauma of being in places where they were not welcomed. And in many cases, um, that was verbalized. And Dr. Turner is working on documenting many of those stories that will be part of a project that he is working with Darren D. Shazer. Uh, Dr. Turner, thank you for what you're doing. What made you think that this was a story worth telling?
Well, Pam, I know my experiences with this. Uh, I was part of the desegregation of the school systems in the fourth grade, and up until then, uh, I had a nurturing environment. From church to kindergarten through the first through the third grade. I had excellent teachers uh, in an outstanding environment to learn. And I had a lot of people who believed that um, I could be anything I wanted to be. And they encouraged that. And the way that they taught it, I loved it. But uh, going into the fourth grade, um, I was told that I was going to go to I was going to the white school, Spear Street Elementary, and be part of the integration of that school. So that was what I had to kind of deal with.
Did you know what that meant? You were in the fourth grade, that you were going to be part of integrating a school.
I I didn't quite know, what it was, what it would encompass, but what I knew it was something going on, because in those days the parents didn't you you weren't kept into the conversation, you know, uh, like kids are today. So I was overhearing things that I knew something was about to happen, and then my parents did tell me, you know, what I would be doing, um, but knowing what was coming ahead, I don't think any of us knew, you know, the kind of things that were going to go on, that would happen.
So Dr. Tim Turner is a professor at Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. Was a fourth grader when they integrated schools in Newberry, South Carolina. Do you remember what that first day was like for you?
Yeah, I do. um, when we were putting this documentary together, I, I I spoke on it because I guess, the anxiety a kid will have on, the first day of school. Well, I was beyond that with the first day of school, because I was going into the fourth grade. So I was very comfortable with where I was going. But now it was the same type of anxiety again. And what happened for me was that first day on the bus. And it seemed like I could have I really thought my parents told me that all of the black kids who were in my area that were part of this were going to be on the bus together. But it turned out that first day, I was the only kid out there to get on the bus, the white bus to come. And that that morning, I watched my friends.
Dr. Turner, looks like you have frozen a bit there.
The white bus came to pick me up, and that was my first experience with the trauma that was to come from this, because once that bus stopped and I got on there, I was the only black kid on there, and there was no seats for me to sit. You know, let me sit down. Ended up standing, and then to get the ridicule and the name calling, because they were calling me the N word. It was nigger this. I had never had that happen to me. I never experienced that. I didn't grow up in an environment where people called me. I didn't. That was my first time, and so I was in a state of shock. I was I was really kind of petrified with that.
I can't imagine what that felt like.
Yeah,
A little black boy on the school with a white bus driver, so there's no one for you to report that to,
no, it wasn't.
and all white students, and you're being called a nigger, and
Yeah,
nobody would give you a place to sit.
right. Well, I did. There was a white boy on the bus that I knew. I had played with him. We were friends. He lived across from my grandmother, so we grew up. We played together all the time. We were friends, and he patted the seat next to him for me to sit down, and I did. And they started calling him nigger lover, and so we both got it all the way there. And Pam, when I talk about him, it was Ronnie Harmon. He was a good friend of mine, lifelong friend, and he was really, really a courageous young man. Because it was a lot that was on him, but he did it, and we both got it. But it was a terrible experience for a kid. It was a very, and you think about that and you think, okay, I'm old now, and but it still brings up emotions, and
Dr. Tim, I hope your video is still going for all of those at home who are watching. Um, it's freezing some, and I'm so disappointed about that because this story is so important because these children have not been given a voice, have not. And Miss Hemingway, let me know if you can still hear him or not. Um, we hear about counseling for children when there is a mass shooting. Okay, he is frozen. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to message him and let him know that. Um, but we don't hear about the trauma that Black children went through in the United States of America, or Negro children, as they were called during that time, the trauma that they went through in desegregating the schools. I will tell you personally, I was part of integrating the school systems in Jackson, Tennessee, and I hope Mr. Tim will be able to hop back on. I was in the third grade when they integrated schools in Jackson, Tennessee. I was attending East High School. It was a first through 12th grade with Mr. Samuel Beasley as the principal. And it was quite interesting when I left school in March of that year. We had water fountains that didn't work. The water was rusty most of the time. We had bathrooms that didn't have, some of the stalls didn't have doors on them. We had a heating system. They used coal for heating. So they closed the schools down and they renovated the schools that, because white children were going to be coming to East School. East became an elementary school. Um, and so, as a third grader, when I came back to school and I saw that we had a new heating system, we had new water fountain, we had renovated bathrooms, just that message alone for me as a child, seeing that I wasn't good enough for this. But now that white children are going to be attending this school, there's funding now to upgrade and to renovate this school. Um, and a little white boy in my class, Sammy Upton, I don't know where he is today. Sammy Upton turned the fishbowl over on me. And I can't remember if anything was done to Sammy for turning the fishbowl over on me. Dr. Tim, are you near your Wi-Fi? Are you near your Wi-Fi?
Yeah, I am, but uh, for some reason it it jumped to another signal on there.
Okay,
So I think
because
I
you
should be
froze,
good. I'm
you
sorry about
froze,
that.
and yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So you were talking about your friend who let you sit on the seat with him,
Yeah,
and what a brave young man. Did you ever ask him why did he do that?
yeah, I did.
The little white boy that let you sit
Yeah,
with him.
it was Ronnie Harmon. Yeah, Ronnie and I, like I said, we were lifelong friends. So we talked about it. I had to talk to him because, Pam, that first day he saved my life, I thought, because it was really too much for a fourth grader to 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 deal with. And with him letting me sit down, at least I felt it was some humanity somewhere. And so, yeah, we talked about it. And what he told me was that I just thanked him for doing that. I always, throughout life, every so often, I just thank him about that. And he was saying that it was nothing to thank him for. He was a friend of our family. He ate with my grandparents. He was there all the time. Everything we did, he did. And he said his father raised him to treat people right. And that was what he lived by. He was a simple guy, but he did something great. And I always wanted people to know, because I really did think he saved my life, because I don't know. I always wondered, I said, could I have done that? Because it was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure on other kids to not do right, because that peer group pressure is something else. And when you have a whole busload of people saying nigger, that for me, yeah, it was a lot. And with him letting me sit down, that helped a lot.
So,
But
so your parents were educators, so you
yeah,
were a good student. How did
yeah.
this impact your learning when you go to this school where you're not only having to deal with racism, you're dealing with fear, and now you're trying to learn and being treated like you're not as smart as other kids?
What Pam, what really happened with that? when you first get in that situation, and with us doing the documentary and hearing other people's story, you really you're so overwhelmed, you're so afraid that you really can't. It's like learning is something never it's it's not at the forefront. You're in a try to survive mode, and you're just too afraid to really learn. You're just trying to be there. And I know it took me a while, and I heard other people say so too. I came out of it, but it took a while to just be able to do basic stuff. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. What happened to a lot of kids, a lot of kids missed grades through this with doing this process, or they became worse students than they weren't the type of student they were before. And those those stories have to come out because
So
nobody
you,
really talked to us about that.
yeah, and you're working on a documentary
Yeah.
with other students who integrated to schools in Newberry, South Carolina. Over the years, do you think that there's just been suppression of what you all went through, what I went through? Nobody asked me how I felt.
Yeah, that's the strangest thing. Like I was saying, Pam, I talked about this at a Martin Luther King event some years back in my hometown. And I told about my story of what I went through because it was at the time I was in the fourth grade, it was 67, 68. And so in 68, Dr. King was assassinated. And what I brought up about that was that I in my at my house, people were, crying and everything. And when I went to school, there were people who were celebrating. You know, it was something, it was some kind of thing. And I was like, this is crazy. But
So you're going to school with some people that are celebrating the assassination of
yeah,
Dr. Martin Luther King, somebody who looks like you.
right. Yes. Yeah, there were people who did that. And I talked to other people in different states. It didn't just happen in my it happened other places. People don't realize the type of environment that was out there. People think Dr. King was uh, looked up to by everybody in America, and that was not the case. That wasn't the case.
Yeah, I saw an interview once with Reverend Jesse Jackson, and he said at the time of King's assassination, he was the most hated man in America.
That's what I'm saying. And so that hatred was presented to the kids, and so they felt the same thing that the parents. And that's one of the things I learned doing this whole integration thing was that hatred was taught. It was a taught thing.
Yeah, Dr. Turner, this documentary that you're working on, where several other people from your school are telling their stories. One of the things that you spoke about is the fact that you don't remember seeing other Black kids. That it's almost like they kept you all separate.
That when we all talk about it, I was there, but if you weren't in my class, I didn't see you. And that's really strange because I know these people. A lot of them were in my class. We graduated from high school together. But when we were there, I didn't know it. I didn't know till later on, and when talking about it. And then when people came out, when I spoke at this church on MLK Day, birthday, uh, so many people came out of the woodwork saying, I was there. I was involved in this. And then that's when I found out there were people before me. I'd always thought I was in the first group, to do this. And no, there were people before me. And when I started hearing the stories, that's when I knew something had to. I kept wrestling over how to get this out. And so I thought I was going to write a book about it. And then I was talking, my daughter is an actress, and we were talking, and she said you should do a documentary. And that rang true because I said, okay, everybody's voice can get out there and people can do it. And just trying to get everybody together. But it's like God is working with this thing because I have friends who are searching out people for me. Everything is falling in place, even with us meeting Darren and Ice who are filming and putting this thing together, doing the sound. And my daughter had worked with them, and she said, Dad, I got the right people to do the documentary. So I did a Zoom with them just to tell them my story. And they said, they bought in. They said, we believe in it, and we will do whatever we have to make this work, because we didn't have the money and everything, but they were just working. And so now we have a GoFundMe site up, and we're going to be writing grants and trying to get the funds, but this will happen. I am very dedicated to do this.
And it must be done. But this question that Patience Hemingway has is a burning question that does not get asked or answered very much. Her question is, so do you think the Black community would have been better off without integration slash desegregation? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, that's a very good question. We gave up a lot for this because what I saw, the Black school system was great. We had teachers who really cared about you. And in part, in the education field, if you got a teacher who believes you can be something, after a while you will believe you can be something. But if you go to a school system where you can feel when people don't believe you're intelligent or you're smart, you can feel that it cuts, then you won't. It does something to you, and you have to fight through it and do all kind of things to make it. And I made it through. I got a lot of scars, but I know a lot of people didn't make it through. And so that makes it really difficult. What we didn't have was the resources. And I think family people thought that if they put us together and we got the resources, then teachers would be teachers, because teachers were held in high respect in the Black community when I grew up.
And you thought the white teachers would be the same.
I think everybody thought that. So you put them together, but you can't change a person's heart. So, not all teachers were like that, but they had teachers who would really try to harm you, and not physically harm you, just mentally can mess with you, and that's that is a trauma that, we still see today. I had the first book without, I had a brand new book, the 4th grade. I had a book. There were nobody's name was in it until I wrote mine. And I never had that before. It was always 8 to 10 people's names already in the book. But I didn't have the environment to learn like that. I had to, I started doing, and I did okay. But it took a little while to do it. But I just look at the number of people who had problems. And I had problems at it, It just, it was a lot to be on you. And I know when people say, when we integrated, it was like the integration was one way. So you lose your culture. You
Ah,
lose the things that you have, that you grew up with. You know, when I hear people now, when they talk about it, a big thing in the Black school system was May Day. When they wrapped the
mhm.
maypoles,
Yes.
that
And
wasn't real.
assemblies and glee clubs.
Yeah, all of that, we were doing plays and stuff. The third grade, we did a three section play, and I was in it, and you had to memorize all that stuff. And we were doing that in kindergarten. We put on our kindergarten graduation, and the students, we had to do parts. All of that is
You
sort of,
lost all that.
we lost all of that. It wasn't the same. What people didn't look at, we lost Black teachers. When full integration occurred, that's when, if a teacher was fired, let go, they were Black. If it was a Black,
40,000, we don't talk about that either.
yeah,
40,000 plus African
they
American
lost,
teachers and
right,
principals lost jobs
lost
and
job.
or were demoted.
Yeah,
And the
that is
impact on the African American community economically, psychologically, none of that gets talked about.
none
Patients
of,
said we had one-way integration. Black
yeah,
kids had to go to white schools, Black schools were closed.
that was so wrong, and that was across the board.
Mhm.
In those schools, like the school in my hometown, because both of my parents were teachers. My mother elementary, my father taught high school math. And we would go to the games at Gallman High School. First of all, in the Black communities, they named the schools after prominent educators. And Dr. Ulysses S. Gallman, my father talked about him in high esteem. But Gallman High was where we wanted to go because we would go to the games and stuff. My father would, he would work the gates. And so we would go, and all the kids, we would play. But the love for that school, you could feel it. I mean, you could really feel it. The band, everything was, it made you feel like you were at home. It was it,
Patients,
it was the right place.
yeah, 40,000. She put in there 4,000. No,
No, it's 40.
40,000.
Yeah. It was across the
40,000.
board. People lost job. I was looking in the research for this in Kansas, where part of that, to be the Brown versus Board of Education thing. So there were 11 Black teachers that were let go. They had 11. They kept 200 white teachers. They fired the 11. Seven of those filed a lawsuit. They lost. One of the teachers who filed a lawsuit had a PhD, and they lost. And what they said in the verdict was that, um, having the qualifications is good, but it's not everything when it comes to teaching.
Well,
Because they had white teachers who had certificates, and that's the thing. These teachers, the teachers in high school with my dad, I look back at an old yearbook, and all of them had uh had gone to college. They had college degrees from Black colleges, but everybody had it. They had degrees. They were really good. My father was an excellent math teacher.
but didn't your
They,
father lose his job?
my father lost his job when I didn't see a lot of my friends until full integration occurred in 1970. And so the Black high school, Gallman, was became a middle school. So that's where I went. And my father taught, who had been a high school teacher, he was teaching then middle school algebra. And uh, when he was teaching there, uh, a white girl in his class, one of his classes, she got a C, but she was from a prominent family, and her family thought she didn't deserve a C, so they brought in a lawyer and the principal, and they pulled my father in there, and they tried to force him to change her grade, and he wouldn't. He he was adamant about it. He said he told me. He said, "I told, we had a white principal." He said, "I told him there were things he was willing to die for,
Mm.
and he wasn't going to do it." And he didn't. My father was very stubborn with that. He was not going to do it, and he didn't. And he was let go that next year. That after that year, and he got a job in another county. But I was so proud of him and what he did.
What are you most surprised about as these stories are being told? The documentary that Dr. Turner is working on called Prisoners of War. I don't think that we have thought about African American children being prisoners of the war of desegregation in America, which was domestic terrorism.
Yeah,
The picture that we showed for the to promote the show is a little black girl getting off the bus and a National Guardsman with his gun, and the fact that kids had to be escorted. And one thing that patients mentioned, we only hear the story about Ruby Bridges,
yeah,
but even as we hear the story about little Ruby Bridges in Topeka, Kansas, we still don't hear about the emotional trauma of little Ruby Bridges. Why do you think America has never told your story, Dr. Turner? And why have Black people shied away from talking about this? Let's just talk about why Black people, because nobody can tell our story better than we can tell it. Why is it that you think that's been the case?
well, you know, um, when I'm talking to people now and just reaching out to them, we put that stuff so deep back into some crevices and close the door on it just to survive. That's why,
Mm.
I didn't know what the title entitled this, but I thought about prisoners of war when I thought about what we were going through, the mental thing that we were trying to overcome to survive. So you are just in there surviving, and you're like a prisoner of war. And I think not talking about it, I mean, I I'm talking to more and more people that I never knew they went through it. And a lot of them I feel are successful and all, but when we go back, when we bring this up, or when they see the promo to the documentary that we're making, they go back. And when they go back in the hurt and everything. I've had friends that say, "I had put that stuff away, man, and you brought you opened the door to bring it back out." I have
Eh,
friends who say, they tried to blend into the wall, when they were in this. And I was saying, well, will you talk about it? They're not there yet. Just to talk about it. You would think it's
there's still people who don't want to talk about it.
yeah, yeah. There's still people who won't talk about it. I'm working on them and trying, but it's not something you can't force them,
Right, right.
because it can be a lot of embarrassment if you miss the grade, or something happened like that. And these are smart people.
Yeah, when you talk about I have the information for your GoFundMe project to do this documentary on Black children who were part of the desegregation of American schools. And I will also say, if you know anyone who was a part of that in any community, please let us know because we can interview them here as well as make their stories known across the country. Because I think we need to I think even part of helping white people to understand our pain, because as I wrote, systematically it has been looked at as if Black people don't experience pain the same way that white people do, which is why it was easy to sell a baby from a mother's breast during slavery and sell mothers from their babies, because we have been looked at, as one man said, Black people were looked at in the South as superior animals.
Yeah.
So the fact that we had this one-way integration, nobody nobody was concerned about Black little children walking through masses of people, calling them names. And then one lady told the story of being at the bus stop, and as they would get ready to put their foot on the step to get in the bus driver would pull off.
Yeah.
How, or on the bus, and the bus driver would take off really quickly so that
And
they all
fall.
could
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah. There are a lot of stories like that. Yeah. There are a lot. You know, this is the thing, Pam. The more I dig into this, because I always wondered, I said, how did Dr. King and then why did they want to do this? Because I said they couldn't have known that it was going to be this kind of trauma on the kids. But when I read more, they really wanted integration. It should have been a thing where white kids went to the Black school. You know, it should have been
Two ways.
yeah, it should have been a lot more. Uh, they should have gone both ways, and white parents weren't going to let their kids go through anything like that. You know, and they weren't. They didn't try to put them, and they probably wouldn't have had any problem, but that wasn't going to happen, and so they still didn't want to have the integration of the schools, and so people were angry about it. You know, now you had some teachers who were okay, but if you got people who are angry about it, they can do little things to you. You know, because I've had a teacher. I had a teacher, and I just know, you know, she was just no good for Black kids. She was no good. She was terrible. And
What did she do to make you think she was terrible?
well, Boozer, she was just the way, you know, she would always say Negro. You know, the way that she would do, she did little things, but one instances she called me to the desk. You know, I'm just back there not causing anything, but she called me up and she wanted me to read something to the class because I could authenticate the Black voice. And I looked at it. It was a article, and it started out "We niggers," and I was like, I know this woman is crazy because she wants me to read this to this class, a white class,
And it,
and
wait a minute, it started out, we niggers?
that's how it started. After that, my eyes blurred up. I don't remember anything else. The first sentence was that though. It
Did
started
you
out.
read it?
No, no, I didn't. You know, and this is the thing
And let me
because,
just ask, how did you find the courage to put that on the
well,
table
you
and say,
know,
I'm
this
not
was the
reading?
thing. I was raised to respect teachers.
Hmm.
That's how we were raised. But I couldn't do that. And I told her, no, I can't do that. And I sat down. And, you know, Pam, that night I had a talk with God. I talked to God. Like, I said, listen, if Boozer goes to heaven, I don't want to go. That's how I felt. Because if she got in, something was wrong with the whole system. Because she was trying to harm Black kids. Any little thing she could do to make you feel low, she was there to do it. And she was a teacher. And
And she was a teacher.
she was a teacher. And over the years, I still haven't gotten out. She shouldn't be in there. I tell you, I don't care how she changed. she
She shouldn't make it to heaven.
she shouldn't make it. She
Uh,
shouldn't she shouldn't get a
Hey,
pass on it, man, because she harmed a lot of kids. A lot.
you know, as we talk about African Americans and comorbidities and heart disease and
Yeah. Woo. Yeah, all of that.
health, the stress of being
The
Black
stress.
in America,
The stress of
nobody,
they
say
don't
again,
talk about it. It is stressful being Black in America. It's stressful.
And patients put in the comment, Dr. King's autopsy showed his heart was that of a 60-year-old instead of a 30-year-old. I
Yeah, I can,
wonder what the
you know,
heart condition of these
oof,
kids during
that's what I'm
desegregation.
I I do too. Because I mean, Pam, you've been on the recordings
Yeah.
and you see people go back in time, you know, I to
And I'm gonna tell you, this is gonna be a very powerful documentary that you all are doing. And I'm gonna tell you something. I I I cannot imagine how they feel because Darren and the other photographer and we end up crying with
yeah,
some of these stories that we're hearing
I
because we
know,
cannot imagine that people have gone through this and we have not even given it any kind of validation. And we're just
Pam,
supposed to keep going.
that's what I was thinking, because I was at Tuskegee. I was a professor there, and we were in a conference, a bioethics conference. In that conference, you had to do it was one of those things that you do. Uh, you had to draw one of the most traumatic experiences in your life, and then you were
Mhm.
going to talk about it, show it to the group. It was a workshop kind of thing, and I drew a school bus with me standing up uh, on that bus, and other kids on there. And when I started talking about it, I started crying, and the
Mm.
people in there said, "Oh wow." They said, "You need help. You need to go get," he said that your hometown, they need to do some kind of, they got to do, you know, some kind of intervention to say, "Hey, I'm sorry about this." I really didn't know. I said, "Wow." I wasn't expecting to do that, but that's what I drew when it said a traumatic time. That was mine.
You
And
know, America needs to say, I'm sorry.
yeah, see,
Because
that's
your stories, those stories that we're going to hear in that documentary, they are reflected in every community in the United States of America where there was hostile environments during desegregation. Beverly Bradshaw in Memphis, Tennessee says each generation enjoys benefits from prior generations that suffered through. That is the way of this existence. More Black experiences need to be shared on a regular basis with others in some new 21st century way. I think the largest group of educated Blacks in America need to lead this charge collectively.
mm,
You know, I think, and she's correct, but I think for the Black experience in America, because we've suppressed so much
I know, just to survive here.
just to survive, when you think
Yeah,
about Black women couldn't even report rape.
yeah,
Who you going to report to that you were raped?
yeah,
And so we have existed in a culture of fight or flight all the time.
yeah.
Um, and and I think as one as I think sometimes it's almost as if when you think you've arrived, you don't even want to talk about the past anymore.
Yeah,
Apparently, I don't know.
yeah,
Here we are in
yeah.
2022,
I know.
and this happened in 1954
Yeah, well,
and
54,
64.
and you
54
see
was when it was
when Brown versus Board, but you see
right.
the length of time before anything could happen. And see, this is the other thing that happened. People were using federal money, when they with the integration thing, to send kids to these academies. I hate academies, because I know what they were set up, how they were set up. And they use money to send the poor white kids, give them money to pay the tuition to go to academies. It was a lot of wrong. The more we dig in this, you see all of the wrong it was so much against us that it's amazing that we are still here and surviving. We are phenomenal to do what we're doing today, because you had all kind of things against you. You know, that when we talk about teachers losing jobs, I remember my parents talking about, everybody was demoted. My mom was elementary, but then she had to teach what they called the slow kid. Undoubtedly, every slow kid had to be Black. You know,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. So the way that this thing went about, it caused a lot of animosity. So then you had, there are
And
people who felt
it's
they
funny
didn't belong either way.
in the all Black schools, there were never any slow kids.
Right.
You didn't get
Yeah.
slow kids to integration.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're labeling these children as slow because
Right.
you must show that they are not as smart as the white children.
Right.
East High School did not have one slow class, but after integration,
I
we
know.
started having
That's
special
what I'm
class.
saying. You had not a. That's what I'm saying. That that's what I'm saying. Uh,
And now every alternative school in America is loaded up with Black children, but we didn't have alternative schools before desegregation.
right. That's
Something's
what I'm saying. Part of
something's
that
wrong.
culture. I talked to a friend the other night because I wanted him to tell his story. I found out that he was involved in this, and he was saying, "Tim, I was a good student. He was a good student, a good athlete." He said, my teachers went to my church, they knew my parents, so you couldn't cut up in class, but you got your lesson. You felt comfortable. He said when he integrated, he was pulled out going into the ninth grade, going into high school. And prior to that, at he was being groomed for the quarterback at the Black high school, and that's what he wanted. He had worked out, he had done all the things, he was going to be that quarterback. And he when he was he was going to the white high school, all of that went away, and he was angry. He said, but he was so afraid. He said, I was a good student, but I couldn't express myself. I couldn't say anything, and it just went downhill. It went down, and he wasn't going to be the Black quarterback. And so all of that, he said it took years, and I didn't know. I really didn't know. I We're gonna try to get his story because, man, he has a story, and but it's just so many stories. Sometimes I have to just find myself. This is too much, because the more you dig, the more you see. You see just outlaw stuff that people were doing to hold back Black kids or Black people. That was too much. The more we
Eh,
dig, this thing is really needed. After I talked to a couple people the other night, I said, "Oh, this is God working, cause it's the stuff that's coming out is needed to come out, and hopefully it helps some of the people to heal. But it's a story that needs to be captured for history, because
Yeah.
right now, how history, a lot of Black people erasing stuff after why slavery never took place, you know, all kind of stuff. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
as was pointed out, the only story that gets told is showing Ruby Bridges, but nobody talks about how other
Yeah,
African American children were able to endure.
yeah.
And
If you
the
listen to the Ruby Bridges, okay, because Ruby Bridges, she was in the New Orleans one. The other Brown, I forgot her name. She was in the Kansas City.
Yeah, Brown versus Board of
Yeah,
Education. She
she
was
was
in
in that. But
Topeka.
Ruby Bridges was in New Orleans,
Okay,
and
right,
then
right.
she was in the only child going in there. And if you listen to her story, because I look at them, because I always look behind the scenes on her. I say, I know she is having some problems today, because when she went in there and had to have the the armed forces with her. Parents pulled all the kids out. So when she went to lunch, I mean to the cafeteria, she was the only one in there.
Really?
Yeah, it was no kid. She had one teacher who would teach her, but she had nobody. My wife was involved in the integration in Mississippi, and she was saying, how when we talked to one of the young ladies who I was in class with in the fourth grade, and she was talking about the things that went on with her, with my wife was saying how lonesome it was with her because the girls were all alone. So she said she never had anyone to play with at recess or at lunch, and then if anyone was picked, she was the last person picked. So you try to deal with that, but wow, when we talk about it, when our daughter was in high school, she interviewed us about she needed to have an interview on do a project, a school project on something, and she did it on us with the integration, and it kind of blew away the class and her teachers, but it made my wife and we talked about that stuff again, and I got mad because my wife was, she's a great woman, and not to have anybody to play with and stuff. That was something we weren't experiencing. We didn't have that.
And you
And
can
then
never
you
go
go
back
to
and
that.
get that.
Yeah, go it's we survived it, but man, the price that we paid.
And continuing to pay as we look at
And
the
so
condition of
now,
African.
yeah, so this is what I'm seeing. Back then it was you didn't hear, it I was looking up this thing. You used to hear people say you're trying to act white if you're trying to be educated or reach higher goals in education. That was something that came out later. Really, it came out doing after integration because it was nothing like that. Nobody was saying that when their schools were all black. It was not acting white. You were just education was important in the black
Right.
neighborhood because you could get
And
out, you could obtain something.
right. It was
Education was
stressed.
important. Yes, it was
And
stress.
and the other thing, and we're gonna close here, the other thing that's quite ironic, um, the fact that people work so hard to get into schools where they could learn better. Then
Yeah,
once we integrate, then all of a sudden education is not important.
right.
Reading is not important.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that they started to feed that lie to our children that being smart, get bullied when you're smart.
Yeah,
Who heard of that during
yeah,
in all
that's what I'm
black
saying.
schools?
That's what it wasn't that. That's what I'm
It
saying.
wasn't there. Yeah.
The things that we we lost it we had something, because now when I go back to my hometown, all of the black businesses, okay, we were segregated, but there were black businesses. People ran their own business. So there was a lot of money in the community, and the community looked good. When I go back now, it's everything is beat down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't like that. I remember that. A friend of mine we went through and we looked at, he was saying all the school teachers lived there in the neighborhood. Oh, they were some great neighborhoods. And then the people who were saying if the poor and people who were better off, it wasn't anything because you lived by each other and they took in your kids and did things. In my neighborhood, my parents, we had the World Book Encyclopedia. That was the internet before.
Right.
And everybody in the neighborhood would come if they had to do a school project and they needed an encyclopedia. They came to our house to use it. Everybody didn't have a World Book, but we had it, and it was used like that.
And a community environment, I'm sure
The
if they needed
community.
some extra help, your parents were there to give it to them.
Yeah. Oh, they tutored all the time. Yeah. From
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not just in our local area, all around, you know, black people would come from cities over to get
And
tutored
probably
by
not
their
getting paid. And I
I
think that's
don't, yeah, I don't,
that's
but
the
they
other
got
thing.
to it. They could bring,
Yeah.
yeah, people worked out things, but they made sure it was a sense of community that I know we didn't want to give up that, but a lot of stuff that a lot of the things that we don't have now, or we
Right.
have a small amount, you know, that was really important. And
Yeah.
that
Well,
was the reason why when I finished high school and some other friends of mine, we knew we were going to an HBCU. And that's where I found again that same kind of community thing that I was looking for.
Dr. Timothy Turner, who is a professor at Jackson State in Jackson, Mississippi, he is spearheading a document called Prisoners of War, POWs. It is a story of African American children who were on the front line desegregating schools in the United States, telling these untold stories of this very traumatic experience that has impacted generations, uh, and is still impacting the results of test scores with African American children today.
Yeah,
Where would we be today had there not been desegregation? Because it also tore up the community. It broke down the African American community. This is a hot topic. And thank you for spearheading this. Thank you for leading this effort. And I encourage other people across the country, find these stories, tell these stories, because this is our history. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us tonight on the
thank you,
Timbuktu
man.
Report.
Thank you so much. And anyone, if you look at the promo, and if you can do anything to help us raise the money that we need to make this document, we're gonna do it. We're gonna write grants, but just share it with as many people as you can, what we're trying to do. And I just believe, I know it's gonna happen. So we're gonna make this work. But thank you
Again,
so
you're welcome. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for standing in harm's way for so many of us. We thank you all so much for joining us tonight for the Timbuktu Report. Dr. Rickson will be back with us next week. We hope he's having a fine time wherever he is. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for watching and sharing. If you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe to our channel. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing at the well. Make it a fantastic moment. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.